Welcome back, all my 40k fanatics out there. I'm DJ here at Tim's Nation to bring you my list that I'll be taking on lane later on this week. Sorry for the delay. It has been a very busy week, suddenly busier than expected, but we are still bringing you our 40k battle report because I really want to get some redemption with my Necrons. See, it's been kind of rough for us. We know this. Not only has it been rough in the aspect of Star Shatter getting shattered, but it was not the army for me. I tried the detachment. I see the power behind it, but it wasn't my style of play. And for that, I definitely showed that, getting trounced in my last game. So I feel like I need to redeem myself with the Necrons. I need to do this for my Necrons. They need redeeming. But we are getting into a kind of a rougher place now. And that's something I want to address in a later video talking about the state of the crons, and do that video for all my cronies, not just this one. But yeah, we kind of gotta shift gears here a little bit. There's been a lot of changes. If you look at the Necron Codex when it was printed to what it is now with the FAQ, the books are almost unidentifiable. I mean, they're very different as far as the detachment loadouts are concerned. So, what do we do? How do we keep Necrons strong? What do we do in this edition? My take on it. This is my opinion and my way of play and my play style and all of that good stuff. I'm going into the reanimation archetype heavily. We're going to go resilience. The Necrons, we are known for reanimating, for standing back up, for being resilient, and all that good stuff. So that's what I'm going with this detachment. We're running the Awakened Dynasty. We're going back to basics. And we're going to try to make our opponent have to overextend into units and not have enough units to cover the field with. Now, we may get beat up and wiped off the table, but we're going to be able to cover the table so quickly and score points so early that it isn't even going to matter, and we're not going to give them enough time. That's at least what we're trying to plan to do with this thing today. All right, enough of that. Let's get over into the list and show the cast of characters that I got in this list today. And here it is. This is the Awakened Dynasty, the first draft in this list that I'm going to be running. The Awakened Dynasty, any unit led by a character gets +1 to hit, so we definitely have characters leading a good amount of the units, well, the units that they can. And then we have a whole bunch of little other characters splashed around for different reasons. Now, the big things of the Awakened Dynasty are, the Awakened Dynasty has some of the best resurrection in the game. Being it that we have that stratagem that we can target a unit for a command point, and res D3 or D3 +1 if led by a character. And we also can resurrect a character who has fallen. This is very helpful for things like the Wraiths, and especially units that try to precision out characters leading units. We are able to basically stop that for a single command point. So that's a great utility and some great defense we have. In this army, I have gone heavy into durability, reanimation arc, or reanimation abilities and such like that. So let's get started with what we got. First and foremost, we are bringing Illuminor Szeras. Illuminor Szeras is such a tank, especially out of the Awakened Dynasty. His high toughness, high wound count, 2-up, 4-up with a 4-up feel no pain makes him brutally hard to take down. He's also infantry, so he can use the strat to stand back up with half his wounds remaining. And if that's at the end and he doesn't have anything, nothing charges him or anything like that, then he also gets D3 back on the reanimation, so he basically almost comes back at full health. Szeras is just a monster in his own right, especially for his point costs. His big abilities, one, he has lone op as long as he's within range of any Necron unit, so that's a huge way to protect him. But he also gives Armor of Contempt, so the AP reduction, as well as increasing the AP of weapons equipped to models within his range. It starts at 3 inches. If he destroys something in combat, he can increase it by 3 inches. Now, the only units he can target have to be battle line, so it's only immortals and warriors that can get the target of this buff. Otherwise, he does have a decent combat and shooting profile, with a weird 36-inch range, strength 9, AP 3, flat 3 damage on his lance with 3 shots. And then in combat, also coming across with 4 attacks that are strength 9, AP 3, 3 damage. So there's that 3 damage, which I'm going to talk about that a lot due to some things in the meta. I really feel like that 3 damage is a very critical point to have a couple of those things scattered throughout the army. Now, obviously, Zeras buffs battle line units, so we will be taking 1 battle line unit. Yes, only 1 to be supported by Zeras, and that is a squad of Immortals. The Immortals are going to be led by an Overlord, a Technomancer, and have 2 Crypt Thralls. The Technomancer is given the enhancement to give them stealth. So they will be -1 to hit. Then with Zeras' buff, they will have -1 AP to their, well, -1 to AP results of the opponent's gun, so they'll reduce the AP by 1. And they will also have the +1 AP from Zeras to all of their weapons. Immortals, a little bit better toughness, a little bit better save than Warriors. And that -1 to hit will also be helpful to kind of keep these guys alive. The Overlord is the Translocation Shroud, so when I go to get these guys in position, when I advance them, I don't have to worry about it. It's a 6 on the advance. We have Tesla, so that we have assault weapons, so we can move and shoot with those, and also be hitting on 2s. And a nice thing with this unit is very stratagem friendly because of the Overlord. So we can spend a command point to go 5 ups for crits for that Tesla. We can spend a command point to reanimate guys to this unit. And on top of all that, because of the Overlord, we can reduce a stratagem to 0 for these units once per battle round. So this unit can get targeted by the strats and be more resilient than I think some people might give credit to it because they're 1 wound models. It's not about running these guys into someone's face. It's actually about trying to bring these guys on a flank with Zeras and just kind of making them more durable than what people expect coming from single wound, 3 up, toughness 5 guys. So, and then again, a bunch of reanimation tricks that we have throughout the army, one with the Resurrection Orb that's on the Overlord, and then you have just the standard reanimation stratagem, which can slow someone down enough that they end up not destroying the squad, and we start bringing them back to full strength. The 2 Crypt Thralls also are 3 extra wounds per guy to help keep the squad alive too. So a couple things in there, and I'm looking forward to seeing if I have a good feeling that I can run with just 1 and make 1 really tough, as long as I don't go throwing it into someone's face and go, here, shoot your entire army at this squad. Have fun. Next up, we'll go over into the Skorpekh Lord, leading 3 Skorpekh Destroyers. So the Skorpekh Destroyers are pretty tough, or pretty strong, I should say. They're toughness 6, 3 wounds, 3 up save model. Pretty standard for guys for this kind of base size model. 4 attacks apiece, so 12 attacks from a squad. Now, with this detachment, we have a strat, Protocol of the Hungry Void, which gives us +1 strength when we use it in combat, as well +1 AP if led by a character. So this unit has strength 7 weapons, so we can get them up to strength 8 with AP 3 flat 2 damage. This is very good for infantry. Might be decent into some vehicles depending on where we're getting that toughness, because again, when we talk about like T9, 7 to 8 really doesn't matter too much there. But there might be some scenarios of toughness 8 things that we want to just get that extra little bit to go over the top with. Where a lot more strength comes from is the Skorpekh Lord. He has strength 10, AP 3, flat 3 damage on his attacks. And mind you, that 11 doesn't matter as much. The AP 4 might be relevant. So it's a very situational strat to use on these guys, which means we're not going to really need to be like, oh, we need a CP for this every single time they charge. Now, just on state-based abilities, the squad, led by the Skorpekh Lord, they get lethal hits the turn they charge. They also have the Plasma Sight to pop for devastating wounds, which some say, oh, isn't that redundant? It can be a little bit, but there's scenarios and situations where I do like having it. To be able to roll those spillovers is kind of nice. So it works both ways.
The Skorpekh Lord also does impact damage, which is really nice when he comes rushing in to do some mortal wounds on the charge. And this one I gave the enhancement for the 4-up, Feel No Pain. He is nearly just as durable as Zeras. And being an infantry character, we can stand him back up as well. So this almost gives us this is like a second mini Illuminor Szeras that we're running in this list. So even after the Skorpechs are gone, that Skorpekh Lord is going to still be a nightmare for someone to have to contend with. Moving on, we have our Wraiths. This is the last of our units led by characters, per se. We have a 6-man squad of Wraiths, led by a Technomancer with 2 Crypt Thralls as well. This Technomancer is going to have the enhancement Veil of Darkness, which means I can up-down them once per game. So at the end of my opponent's turn, pick them up, and then put them back down there in the battlefield. This means that I can put the Wraiths directly on an objective, look at my opponent and say, how badly do you want this objective? These guys are 4 wounds apiece, toughness 6, 3-up, 4-up, and then they have the 5-up Feel No Pain from the Techno. Again, we were talking about the precision aspects of it. Hitting this Technomancer is not easy. The Crypt Thralls give him an added boost to his defense because they're there as long as they're alive. And if they lose him, 1 command point, I can pop him back up and just put him back with a squad. Otherwise, the Wraiths also kind of fall into an interesting column with that protocol, the Hungry Void. Their strength and AP is usually a little lacking, but they do have the 2 damage from the Vicious Claws. So going up to strength 7 actually kind of matters with them, especially with some T6 infantry that we see, some things that Marines put out there. Being able to go above on that T6 and get the 3s to wound and the additional AP can be really, really nice to come off of these guys, especially because they'll get +1 to hit since they are in fact led by a character. Moving on into a couple of their units, we have the Flayed Ones. So I'm taking a 5-man squad of Flayed Ones. These guys, their role is relatively simple. Zone out my opponents. There's a couple ways that can be executed. Going into a list that may rush me early, I could put them directly on the line and draw a line with them to kind of screen out and force my opponent to have to deal with them. In basic screening strategies, they can go onto an objective and set up a deep strike zone for me to be able to pick up units and bring over there, and then build out a lane that can prevent other deep strikes from coming in. Their role is zoning. Depending on what matchup it is, that's what they're going to do. Whether it might be up on the front line because they have infiltrate, it may be more on the back and being on a back objective so that I can focus on pushing things more forward and having a unit that has stealth, that can hide behind a wall and just say, hey, if you got to get back here to get these guys out, and until you do, I'm going to hold this objective. We also have a squad of Ophidians, 1 squad of Ophidians in this list. So this is a 3-man squad. They have their own little plasma sight for when they do charge, if they do, which typically they find a target at some point in the game where that happens. This is a unit that can up-down the entire game, though. They are good for both the aggressive and defensive plays since they can kind of stay back and help protect my backfield from deep strikers as things move forward. And then when I draw the card, whatever the card may be, place them as needed to help me score those secondaries. Because of the fact that they up-down every turn, it's kind of a guarantee. It's like, okay, at the end of my opponent's turn, pick them up. Even if I just put them back down in my deployment zone, you just pick them up and have them to the side. But again, this is a unit that will help zone out my backfield as well as scoring those objectives and scoring points as the game progresses. The last of the actual units in this list is the Scarabs. So we have a 3-man squad of Scarabs. These guys are OC 0, but we do have a lot of Cryptex, so they can get that OC 1. Like things like around Zeras even. But that's not really their role. They're a very cheap unit that I can spread out, and again, we keep talking about that deep strike control. That's a big place where they're going to be playing the game. Making sure that while other units are going and doing work, these guys are able to keep control over the backfield board and kind of keep my opponent out. Now, we don't have any way to stick your home field objectives, so these guys are not just going to hold the home field objective and protect it for days, but they can still protect the home field from deep strikers into the backfield. They can move up the field to kind of control maybe a flank and prevent my opponent from being able to deep strike in on a really good angle. Since I feel like up-down is a very, very big part of the game right now, having units like the Scarabs, the Flayed Ones, and the Ophidians that can fill in those pockets to control more of the board is kind of necessary with this list and with the style we're playing. Now, that's all of the actual units. Moving over into the single model units, first we'll start off with the Catacomb Command Barge we're bringing to in this list. So the Catacomb Command Barge does a couple of things and is actually a utility piece that I've been starting to fall in love with more and more. First things first, it has an aura effect that gives +1 OC. So any of these units that it's nearby, things like the Wraiths and Immortals that are OC2, it can increase it to OC3, helping me keep control of those objectives. Even the Skorpeks are OC2. On top of that, things like the Scarabs, it gives them that OC1. So if there's a Techno nearby, we could end up having OC2 on Scarabs. He has a Resurrection Orb. Now, here's the nice thing about Resurrection Orbs, which I didn't mention this with the Overlord. Resurrection Orb trigger at the end of any phase. So he could move to something and then trigger the Resurrection Orb, especially with two other little friends in this list he can combo very, very well with. And his Resurrection Orb is for D6 when he uses it. Can only target mounted or infantry, but remember, since the Wraiths are led and have an infantry model in it, they count as an infantry unit. So he can target the Wraiths even with that. So there's no shortage of targets for his Resurrection Orb. A lot of his play comes into the late game. He has that, and he has the natural ability to reduce -1 to wound on weapons that are higher strength than him, than his toughness. He has a 4-up invuln, high toughness, good amount of wounds, fly, decent speed. He can maneuver around the board later in the game and be able to harass and pick up small units that may have slipped through the cracks and are holding an objective. He can hit them, take them out, and then take the objective. He's good for that. So that's a lot of where I feel like his role is going to be, but generally he's just been such a great utility piece. He's fast enough to be able to still use his abilities and keep him around the field. I've really been liking him a lot lately in a bunch of lists. Now, as I mentioned, he combos very well with something. And that thing that he combos well with is our 2 Canopic Reanimators. Yeah, we're bringing 2 of these bad boys. So the Canopic Reanimator only has it's a 3-inch aura now. And anyone within its 3-inch aura, when a reanimation protocol is triggered, do it again for D3. So you pop a Resurrection Orb, and you're within range, do it again for D3. Reanimations at the beginning of the turn, do it again for D3. Stratagem for D3 +1, do it again for D3. Got to be within 3 inches, though. Now, again, this goes back to the resilience. These guys end up taking more firepower than a lot of people anticipate, because even though they're only 6 wounds and a toughness 6, they do have a 4-up feel no pain, which means they shrug off a lot more damage than people expect. So I've been kind of wheeling back over these things. I know at the beginning of the Codex change, we kind of shifted off of them because of the shortness of the range, but I think there's actually some value behind them and how they're played. They just take a little bit of different playing. We can't be as aggressive with them, but they still can move around. They can complete actions, same as like some of the other units that we have out there, like the Flayed Ones and the Ophidians being able to complete actions. These guys can too, since their goal is just kind of to be near some of these units, like the Wraiths, like the Warriors. Just be close enough to them to trigger that extra reanimation and really mess with our opponent's numbers when they're trying to figure out and trying to take down our units. We got 2 more to cover. We got, next up, the Hexmark Destroyer. So Hexmark Destroyer, it's really simple. He does a lot of cool things. You know, he can shoot, he can overwatch on a 2-up, he can do a free overwatch, which means we get overwatch technically twice because it calls out the strat. You shoot at a unit near him, he can shoot back at that unit. You know, he's got some cool things he can do. But the coolest thing that he does, and the reason I'm taking him, is he's a singles model with that base size, and is lone operative. So he can drop in to an area, complete an action, thread the needle in a small spot, very hard to zone out, and complete those actions. On top of that, he doesn't necessarily need to be in the most aggressive position. He can just simply be behind a unit when, like, the Immortals want to do shooting. He can drop in behind the Immortals and complete the action. And then something moves. He goes, you know what? I'm going to Overwatch. I'll shoot during your movement phase and do it for free. I really like the Hexmark. I think that this is a great role for him. It's definitely to be able to do secondaries and complete these actions and score these points. That's a golden place for him to be. And I think there's a lot of different units that are going to be able to provide that wall to kind of protect for him to do so. And last up, something we don't regularly see from me. This is a Transcendent C'tan. Yes, a C'tan has made it to this list, and it is one of the more expensive ones at 295 points, the C'tan. And he's here because of one reason and one reason only, that advance and teleport around the field. As you can see, a lot of the theme with this army is being able to control the board and having board placement and having board coverage, and he fits this very well. Now, he's not a slouch. He does have a high strength attack profile with shooting and fighting, but the D6 damage is kind of a little bit scary. You get 4 wounds through and you're all excited, and then you roll 1, 2, 1, 1, and now you're like, wow, I did barely any damage. So something like that is kind of scary to think about and go into. But when you look at the stuff that is more guaranteed, he is reducing, cutting damage in half. He is a toughness 11, 12 wound model with a 4-up invuln and a 5-up feel no pain. He is tough to deal with and take down, and takes a lot of effort himself. And across my army, there's a lot of things that take a lot of effort to put into them to take down. He can also, the big thing, like I said, he can advance and just teleport anywhere on the field 9 inches away, which puts him able to help with secondaries, help with board control, help with board presence, and just all around, just a great unit to kind of cap off this list. He does have Deep Strike inherently, so if I don't really see an initial role for him, he could Deep Strike or Rapid Ingress in and get into that position to ready to start fighting later into the next turn. So that's a big reason why I feel like he fits in really well with this list, and that is the list.
So my primary concern that I have is that this is not a very large army. It's for model count purposes. I mean, we have the 6-man Wraiths plus the attached entourage. Then you have 10 Immortals plus entourage. And then it's 3-man, single. So there's not a lot. But these things are obnoxiously resilient. Things like the Wraiths with 3-up, 4-up, 5-up, and 4 wounds apiece, toughness 6. The Immortals being -1 to hit, having toughness 5, having a feel no pain versus those 1 damage weapons that people will try to use for a larger squad, and multiple sources for reanimation. The reanimators, being able to position them to just trigger that extra reanimations, trying to keep this army alive on top of the fact of how many movement shenanigans we have. Now, one thing you might notice with this list is that other than the reanimators and the Technomancers, even though the Technomancers kind of have a different loadout with enhancements, it's still the same data sheet. The only duplicate data sheets that I have in here is the reanimators. Everything else is singleton. And this is something that my one buddy Ulyss and I have been kind of discussing this a bit, is we have a lot of really good scoring and screening and units that can provide different roles. But when you look at some of the spectrum of like what we're getting points per model, and you look at things like scouts that are 2 wounds, but only 10 points more, I believe, 10 or 20, I think it's 10 points more than the flayed ones. Some of those points per pound we're not getting on them. Now, flayed ones do their job. They are stealth. They do have reanimation, so if you don't dedicate enough, they're coming back. They do shred in combat. When you do hit with them, they have a pretty good combat profile, but they are very frail, very, very frail. And when we dedicate 60 points to them, then that's 60 points for that 5-man unit that might get destroyed. But when you double it up and you take 2 units, now we're starting to cut a little heavier into that percentage of our army. Same thing with Ophidians. Ophidians are amazing at what they do. They are one of the best of it. They're 3 wound models. So you have a 9 wound unit that's only 3 models, so you can fit it in different spots easily. But it's also, they're able to up down for the course of the game. 80 points, not bad. But now when we dedicate 160, and turn 1, you pick them, or turn 2, we'll go with turn 2 in this. You pick both of them up, you draw your cards, you need 1. All right, so 1 gets put back down, the other 1 gets placed. Then you go into the next turn. Because you placed it in a good spot, you pick them both up, you draw your cards, you need 1. 1 goes down, 1 gets placed back at home field. And yes, there's scenarios where it doesn't happen, but there's a lot more scenarios where that does. And also we have some other units that can fill that second area on the fly, like the Transcendent C'tan being able to just auto-advance somewhere else on the board. Yeah, having a C'tan do a secondary or do an action may not be where we ideally want it, but for things like recovered assets, where you have to score it in your end of your opponent's turn, that's one that's kind of tough sometimes because that unit has to survive. Or a sabotage into an area. Well, the Transcendent C'tan is super resilient, and yeah, it's not going to do any damage that turn, but it could almost lock in some of those secondaries, because it's so durable, to have those extra layers of points. Where the Ophidians can't, where the Ophidians have to be in a more defensive position because they're easier to destroy. So by reducing how much we're spending on those units and taking them in single pieces, they're able to do their jobs in whatever matchup it may be. Flayed ones can be on the front line, or flayed ones can be in the back and holding that ground to the deep strike zone, outside of the deployment zone, having an area so that we can move those things, as well as things like the Wraiths, having the Veil. I can pick them up and have them in an area and getting we'll talk about the reanimator in a second, but having things like reanimations in those areas just to make it very tough to dig out. The Scarabs are even cheaper at 40 points. And there are 3 bases that can be their job. Their job is to zone out the backfield. So all 3 of those units have individual roles as they see fit. Now, the Scarabs can actually score and do secondaries as well because of where all our Cryptechs are, including Zeras. So there's a lot of pieces that can do multiple things and multiple secondaries over the course of the game and allow us to continually keep that secondary game going and keep a heavy board presence, be able to push on the board. One thing that a lot of people have noted, especially with like Vanguard of the Marines, is if we can push the board fast and control it fast, it's difficult for those armies to push back out. And other armies that up down, that's a difficult place for them to be when they don't have anywhere on the board to land, and you push them back during those early turns. So that's going to be something that's very helpful, especially in those scenarios. When we go first, we're not going to be able to up down the Ophidians, but being able to advance the C'tan and advance the Wraiths, even advance the Mortals, and get to these things to these further positions will be really nice. Combined with the flayed ones being able to also get out there and draw that lane. Now, reanimators. I personally like to put 1 in reserve and keep 1 on the table. Bringing 1 in from reserve, he can end up showing up there near that close objective, get close to where the Wraiths are, be more defensive and put in a defensive position where something like the Wraiths or the Immortals show up over there, they get hit, and they have their own personal reanimator hiding behind a wall. Reanimators with that 4 of Feel No Pain are durable, and another unit that is very strong to complete secondaries. So as you can see, this list in my core concept is built a lot around not only how I can score secondaries, but how I can cover the map fast. Granted, Going second would be very nice because that would give me the option to pick up the Wraiths and Ophidians on turn 1, preventing the up-down list from doing their thing and allow me to really smother the board on turn 1. But even in the scenarios where I go first, I still have a lot of speed and the ability to advance, since not an up-down list that Marines can put out there is not going to show me really any targets on turn 1. So advancing with these things is fine. I'm auto-advancing with the Immortals for their maximum distance, and I'm able to cover the board very quickly. Things like the Transcendent C'tan, again, can teleport across the field, and we can cover the map very, very quickly, making it almost impossible for the Marine player to really land anywhere to efficiently push back and take me off some of the objectives. In a nutshell, we'll be able to put units right out there in the open, in the middle, and our opponent won't be able to see them because they won't be able to land in any firing lane that can see them. That's the theory. That's what I'm rolling with. We'll see if we can execute it. We're going to be going into the Death Watch, so we'll definitely see some things going up and down on the table. And yeah, it's going to be a very good test. Again, I'm concerned about the model count, but let's see what happens. All right, guys. As always, thanks for watching. I'll talk to you again soon.